So, hello everybody. We've got a few things to cover today and a little bit of time to do it. So, well, we'll make sure to use that time well. So today topic, probably on everyone's mind, maybe while working from home, we can be forward thinking. Hey, this return to work thing that we've been kind of doing for the last 18 plus months, how's it going? Well, that doesn't just have to be a rhetorical question. And today, I'd like to take you through a little bit about what we've seen out there in the wild with many of our customers, and also what we've seen work really well, and some of the things and trends that you might need to be aware of as you're preparing in the coming months. So, as Chris said, I'm Zach Dunn. I'm one of the co-founders at Robin, where I also head up our customer organization. What that means is that I spend all week talking to dozens of folks who are tasked with the really challenging responsibility of getting a large number of employees to start integrating the office back into their week again. The way that we do this is with our workplace management software, but we're not going to talk about that. You can certainly find time to look that up later. What we will talk about is the return to office, specifically how it's going. We've been welcoming people back to the office for a long time now, and I'm happy to report that despite news that says otherwise, most offices are open at this point. And the difference is how much of them is actually being used. On average, we see about 25% of the average offices utilize like actual footprint, their floor plan in use for offices that are open. So really, the bigger challenge that we've seen folks grapple is not a supply problem. That is to say, there's plenty of room to go around for now. It's more of a demand problem. How do you actually get a employee base that is entirely content on most days to work from home to start considering the office part of their week again? It's a tough one. So maybe this will help ground folks. This was a slide from a presentation that we had done way back in April 2021. And at this time, this was the view for how the rest of the year would unfold. So this was mostly US-centric view, but at the time, we were at about 37% vaccination rate among US adults. And well, gosh, that made summer look really good for hitting that magic immunity threshold where people were more adopting that hybrid work model, that flexible work model, and we were ready to move ahead. And maybe by the end of the year, offices would reach the point where they could welcome back not just their employees, but also guests and the like. I will leave it to you all to decide if this is actually how it's played out, but this is basically a reminder that regardless of your plans so far, odds are you've had to change them a few times because the landscape has changed dramatically every few months. And the best plans out there are the ones that have an intent, but not an actual date assigned. So that is to say, how do you actually make sure people understand what the end result you're going for is, adopting kind of like a hybrid work week, a flexible work week, rather than assigning a specific date. If you assign a specific date and you miss that date, you push that date back, gosh, that is a recipe to really frustrate a lot of people in a hurry. And it may not sound fair, but that's the reality. All right, so for the people who are going back to the office, let's talk about what we have seen so far. For background, the way that we collect this data is by aggregating about thousands of our customers' offices globally. All of this is anonymized in a way where we really only look at activity in the office, like desk reservations through our system, as well as which meetings are happening with on-site locations. And we also look at this not just by region, but also by industry that the companies are in. And there are definitely some trends that emerge from that, which you'll see in a second. So everything that we go through, we've been tracking since about March of this year. And every month we publish what we call a return to office report, which shows you the trends and how these are evolving over time. So if any of these things pique your interest, definitely encourage you to check out the return to office report that we will continue to publish until offices are back open. Okay, first trend. People are creatures of habit, as it turns out. So most people who have chosen to return in some capacity are doing so at the same cadence that they start with. That is to say, if you've decided that you're going to come into the office one day a week, it's unlikely that you've deviated from that. So about 8 to 10% of people will come into the office one day a week. And then the same is true for 2 days a week, 3 days, and so on and so forth. So this creates a really interesting opportunity because the good news is if you can get people to reintegrate the office into their week in some fashion, odds are they're probably going to stick with it. But this does mean that over the last 6+ months, you haven't seen too much change about the type of people who are going into the office. And that is definitely a sign that we need to maybe rethink some of how we're positioning this return to office and how the office in a flexible work environment actually can help out the average employee. Because the cost of getting this wrong, as we'll talk about in a minute, is that you actually have people try the office out, realize it's not working for them, and just don't return. Yep.
And Zach, if you can just be a little bit louder, that'd be great. Some people are having trouble hearing through their devices.
Ooh, okay. I can definitely do that.
That's perfect.
Better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So sorry about that, folks. All right. So the average person that has gone back to the office does so about 4 times a month. This is basically hovered around the same number for the last, since about July. But what's really interesting is where you look at this by geography. So we are actually in the US on the low end of people returning to the office. So that is to say, people over there in Australia, New Zealand, 6-7 days a week per month in the office. So while that might not sound like a big deal, that's the difference between someone going in once a week and multiple times a week. And so while the US has definitely made progress in reopening the office, realize that compared to a lot of the other parts of the world, we are a little bit still trying to figure out what role the office is going to have in the average person's week. So, but because we are in the US, there's of course one thing that we have strong preference on, and that is which day of the week we actually show up. Compared to even, let's look at Australia and New Zealand, we have a strong preference that Wednesdays and Thursdays are the most popular days to come into the office for the week. Mondays, least popular for most folks. We have start to see some change of that recently. But what this also means is that the capacity of your office is likely to experience a peak on Wednesdays or Thursdays. And so you can look at those days as leading indicators for how successful your return plan is going. If you're in other parts of the world, that distribution is a little bit more even, but still you do see small preferences emerging for the time of the week that this is happening. So Wednesdays and Thursdays, great ways of benchmarking how successful your return plan is. What brings people back though? Well, generally other people. As we like to say, it's kind of hard to motivate people to go to a party if everybody's RSVP is maybe. One of the big challenges that folks going through this have faced is getting people to understand if they do go into the office, hey, what is the work that they can actually do there better than at home? And some people will try to address that kind of problem by mandating certain days in the office. And we say outright, that is a mistake. It will fail. The only exception where we've seen that happen, not is where you have cases where the office is critical to the type of work done. In certain industries like biotech or places where there might be government defense contractors, things like that, you're going to obviously have a very different relationship with your office because it's really hard to do that work from your living room, thankfully. So the best thing that people can do to have a reason to go into the office, find team collaboration activities. That is to say, join your team in office for an all hands, have sort of a weekly cadence with your immediate department, your team. And those are the sorts of things that cause folks to join their coworkers in the office. And that's also where we've started to see a big difference between the type of people who are consistently returning to the office and those that aren't. Very few people will go to the office alone. But when they do, or maybe they haven't figured out what the office is going to be for them, this is what we look at next, and that is the 21% of people who try the office once and do not return to it. We call this bounce rate. So for context, a normal bounce rate today, that is about 20%. So if you have out of 5 employees that are choosing to go back to the office in a given month, 4 out of the 5 of them will likely return at some point that month. 1 in 5 will not. If you start to see numbers like higher than that, that might be a sign that people don't yet know why they're going to use the office. You can see in some of these numbers that obviously some of the variant news recently has affected this, but high level, definitely I would strongly recommend folks monitor how many people are one and done per month bounce rate, because again, that might mean that people need to learn how to use the office again. Certain industries are more susceptible than others. IT, that is to say the tech industry, as you might expect, they can work from everywhere, generally speaking. Whereas mining, well, kind of hard to bring mining work home with you. So, some of these may not be a surprise, but definitely if you are supporting tech companies, you are probably most susceptible to high bounce rates and you probably need to do a little bit extra legwork to give people that context to stay. The other trend, which may not be surprising to some folks, is if you're reopening your office, you're probably treating your employees as the most important guest, the most important visitor that you can have. It's certainly true that in a lot of organizations, you do have to work with other parts of the industry, you collaborate with people from other companies. That sort of work we've seen remain virtual. And so for folks who are hosting guests on site, that is the exception, not the rule, at least for now. We fully expect that to change in 2022, but it's a safe bet for you to focus on your employees for now. So takeaways. And then if there's questions, happy to field those. For a lot of folks, this has been a rolling process. And that's an important reminder that there is no opening day. You have people who are over time learning to reintegrate the office into their week, and that's okay. There are things that you can do to encourage people to start reintegrating the office into their week, but ultimately it is up to you to make sure that the office has a role, a job to do in the average employee's week. That can be free food, or it can be hosting team collaborative environments. Either one works. Because again, teams use offices, not just individuals. The cost of getting focused work in the office wrong today is people will just work from home. Cost of getting team collaboration wrong, a lot higher, because again, you're probably not hosting those all hands in your living room, at least in person. And the type of work that people expect to do in the office has a lot more impact on willingness to use the office than geography at this point. So if you are in some of those industries where working from home is really possible, obviously you have some friction that you're going to have to work against. I know when we're talking about commercial real estate and planning 2022 budgets, a big conversation among many of our customers has been, hey, should we shrink the amount of space that we have? And we would say no, not yet. It's certainly true that flexible work can reduce the amount of space that you need to operate on a daily basis. But right now, with the low utilization, what we recommend is that you look at it more of like an opportunity to increase the longevity of the office that you have, because most folks, they're still learning to reintegrate the office. And it's very likely that shrinking your footprint today based on these patterns of behavior will be a little premature. And so we would strongly recommend making sure that the office you have can support the work before you start adjusting the actual footprint of that office. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, you can find more of those return to office reports on our site. We publish them monthly, but Chris, any questions?
No. So I think we have a few questions here, and I just want to do a plug for the return to office reports. They're awesome. You should definitely check them out. It's really interesting kind of seeing the trends along your return to work. So one question I had just in general, and this is something that kind of came up, is a question around kind of why people aren't coming back. Do you guys have any like data or kind of reasons why folks are not coming back into the office when they bounce?
Well, again, I think that there's some challenges about like, well, why would I? And I think that again, this analogy might be really strained, but would you really want to continuously risk going to a party with only maybes as RSVP? Because when you show up, it's kind of like a mixed bag about like, what can you expect? Are there going to be people there? Is it going to be a ghost town? And so a lot of the times it's just a sign that people tried it and they didn't see an environment that was yet conducive to the work that they had to do.
Got it. And out of the data, someone was asking, what type of work effects are you seeing companies add to encourage in-person work?
Work effects, you said?
Work effects, yes.
Okay. So I'm realizing I may not fully understand the question. Is there a synonym for that?
Yeah, I think they're trying to get it like what type of things within the workplace are you seeing organizations use to get people back into the office, and hopefully get them to stay coming back to the office.
Well, you're going to laugh at the easy answer here. It's free food. But, omelets aside, uh, generally, this is where your mid-level managers are your best asset. Um, you got to really have an opportunity to have small teams plan in-office days together. And it's generally not an amenity of the physical space, but a critical mass of people that you care to work with live. And so make sure that you have more team collaborative spaces that those folks can conduct those sorts of small group meetings in.
Great. And we did get a question of if we could get a link to those return to work reports. I will make sure to get that from Zach, and with the recordings, we'll send that link as well. So, but just go to robinpower.com/blog, and I know they have all of the reports there as well. So just go to their website. Cool.
Cool.
So I think, really great data, really good presentation. As I said, we'll have the recordings and we'll send this out to everybody after the fact so they can kind of look at the data even more closely. But Zach, thank you so much for taking the time, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.